Corporate Board Member presents an informational webcast. On this edition, Technology in the Boardroom, from Portal to Platform, with T.K. Kerstetter, President of Corporate Board Member, and Joe Ruck, President and CEO, BoardVantage.
Welcome. I'm T.K. Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Board Informational Webcast. We're here at our West Coast Boardroom Summit, and I want to deal with the topic of board portals and how they have moved or are moving to a platform with technology in the boardroom. With me today is Joe Ruck, who is the President and CEO of BoardVantage, a company that has played a significant role in introducing technology in the boardroom, particularly with board portals. And maybe that's the first question for you, Joe. What's created all the interest here?
Technology has been in the boardroom for almost a decade now, and for the longest time, adoption was scattered at best. But you're right. In the past 12 to 18 months, it's shifting dramatically. And we look at a set of internal metrics in terms of our data center operations. So we look at things like bandwidth, storage requirements. We look at number of registered users, all these kinds of things, and they're all up and to the right and in an exponential fashion. In terms of the high level in our business, the customer acquisition, I think in the year 2011, we probably were up by an order of magnitude in terms of new customers acquired compared to the year previous. And the first 2 months of this year, January, February, it looks like we're actually going to steepen that curve even further. So we're seeing a lot of quantitative confirmation of what you're hearing anecdotally. There's something else that I would point to is there's a set of qualitative matters as well. Whereas maybe a few years ago we used to primarily sell to a cadre of tech-savvy directors. Now it has expanded well beyond that, and now we're dealing with more traditional board members, not just traditional board members, but in boards who are, by their very character, traditional. And it's going from corporate boards, spreading out to subsidiary boards, it's going to leadership teams. So you're really seeing some significant differences. And when you look at the drivers, I think what we're now delivering is a combination of mobility, and we heard that mentioned in this morning's session, security, which we heard that mentioned in this morning's session, and interactivity, so for directors being able to communicate with one another. So for the first time, we're beginning to capture processes, in a way that directors want it, and do it on the terms that they're comfortable with, i.e., easy to use enough. So you and I, we've been at this subject about for a couple of years, and you always say, well, is the board ready for technology? I think what's really happened is that technology, after a pretty sluggish start, has accelerated, and is now finally meeting the standards that boards always wanted. So it's more of a question of, not are boards ready for technology, but is technology ready for the board? And that's what I would put an emphatic yes on.
Well, I've always said that it's not a case of if a board will be using a board portal, but when. I strongly believe that this is technology that will follow everything from credit cards to cell phones to you name it, where people were sluggish at first, but today can't live without it. And I think that the board portals is no different from that. And I'm sure that part of that, can you just take a second and talk about why iPads were such a significant event in changing that boardroom?
One thing that is really unique about the iPad, it's an online device, so you get the immediacy of online access, but you got the same thing in a laptop. But what it does so much better is it also gives you the readability of print. And of course, that's what directors do all day long with their board books. And now they've got this sort of golden combination. Plus, it's a paper-thin device. It's very mobile. And the second thing I would say about the iPad is because of the graphics engine in the operating system, it allows us as developers to present information in a very rich manner. So, we give you the ability to mark it up, like highlight sentences, put notes on. You can literally get a stylus and write on it. If you want to mark a page or a paragraph, which in paper maybe you did with a paper clip, here you drop a pin, as if you go to Google Maps and how you mark a street with a little red pin, we do the same thing. So it's a visually engaging experience. And then the final thing I would say is that you can actually do some things on the iPad you simply could not do on the laptop or in print. And I'll give you one example of it, which is that if you get a board book, you get access to the current meeting. But what we can do is not only give you access to the current meeting, but also give you access to all the meetings of the past 2-3 years, a whole slew of them, and do that in a way that is engaging. And we do that via animation, again, from the graphics engine that the iPad provides. So you just basically, they flow through it, you click on it, and you go to the meeting from a year ago, a meeting 2 years ago, and you immediately have that in-depth information at your fingertips. So you're really looking at something which is, it's more than just trying to get parity with paper. We're now getting something which is better than paper. And I think that's why you're seeing this excitement about this device, in the boardroom, whereas traditional technology like laptops never really got there.
Well, there's got to be some concern as you meet with these companies. Certainly security is always an issue, but there's also an issue of discoverability. People are concerned, where you can shred that piece of paper, at times. Talk about how you deal with that question of discoverability.
Discoverability should be a #1 concern for directors. And it's actually a little bit different in this now post-iPad world than in the pre-iPad world. Because in the pre-iPad world, you would only worry about the server. And that actually was a problem that we solved a couple of years ago. So you could delete everything, and was it deleted, then you knew it was totally purged from the system because we only keep a single copy of it. Now you go to a system where you have a mobile device where you want to download information. It goes to an encrypted repository. And a director will be on a plane on the way to a meeting, make some notes, and then have those notes in the board meeting for referral. But that's of course to the heart of your question. Okay, so what if the director doesn't delete those notes? Well, what we have done is we actually keep whatever the director puts in that briefcase under central administrative control of the GC office. So we can actually do the same thing that you mentioned here a minute ago. After the meeting, you see GCs collecting board books and shredding all the paper. We do the same thing. You can basically delete all the content and all the briefcase of all the directors, strike all the notes, and you basically get the same effect.
In the beginning of this in the boardroom, it was all about just the board book and sort of replacing the fact of mailing the board book and having it. But today, as we suggested in the title, it's gone to what we might describe as platform. Talk a little about what you mean when we say platform.
So when you look at traditional board communication, it's a one-way street. I mean, the general counsel basically distributes a book to the directors, and there is no way to come back the other way. The first generations of electronic portals basically mimicked that model. But now what's happening, and again, the iPad plays a big role here, it becomes more of a form of two-way communication. So as an example, you can now, in a modern portal, a good portal, you can do written consents, approvals, you can do notes, you can do secure email, you can do director questionnaires. So all of a sudden now what you're going to is you're going from a mode of access only to a mode of more process. And what we're seeing is that because the iPad is such a device that is so fitting for directors, they actually have grown very enthusiastic about the device in a way that I never anticipated it. It's a funny thing, but you get the feeling that directors who were previously technology laggards are now turning into technology leaders since they've had a taste of the iPad. And when you look at technology over the past 15 years, you look at 97, 98, 99, the dot-com revolution, it spawned companies like Salesforce, SuccessFactors, which just recently sold to SAP for $3.5 billion. Now you've got the next generation, Web 2.0, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook, but boards sat that out. They were basically on the sidelines when it came to technology. It seems like now, with the iPad, they're trying to make up for that lost time. And they're being so aggressive, and so they're putting a lot of pressure on us and our engineering team to come up with more new functionality, more of that process, more of that platform.
It's not just the directors, though. I'm assuming that this is a pretty valuable tool for a corporate secretary or a GC or anybody that has to do sort of the administration. I'm sure you're getting input on what the platform has to look like from them as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the thing is, there's two sides to a coin, right? I mean, you have the consumers, which in this case are the directors, and then the producers, if I can use that term, are the general counsel, corporate secretary office. What they do is they aggregate all the information. They build this board book from all these separate documents. They put links in it. They set the permissions. That's actually a pretty sophisticated operation, and it requires a pretty sophisticated tool. We feel that again, that challenge was solved a few years ago. But there are always improvements because as more processes being requested by directors, you need to also build the back end for that to support that. So to me, what we're really seeing is that the iPad, it's not an endpoint. It isn't like, wow, we got the iPad, we're a technology board now. No, I think it's really sort of the beginning of a journey where the iPad is going to open up a door, and now it's going to infuse the boardroom with more technology. But where maybe a couple of years ago, that could have been a bit of a scary thought because, well, what is all this technology going to do? Is it going to work? Since it's all on the iPad, which is sort of by its very definition is an easy-to-use device, it is actually something that directors are really going to be very comfortable with.
You know how fast technology changes and how fast it's changed already just from the early entree of board portals to what it is today. So I'm going to test you and have you look sort of 2 more years out and say, what could we not be thinking about that probably will be a big thing where this platform evolves?
This is going to be careful with because, like you said, who knows how fast things will change. But, again, I go back to my pre-iPad, post-iPad metaphor to describe, what's going on, and the iPad having kind of opened up a door. And so this idea of going from access to process, and then the next thing from process, which process by its definition is formal, to a more informal way of communicating, which is more director collaboration. And that is definitely something on the near-term horizon. And then on top of that, I think you're going to start seeing some of those tools that come from the consumer space, from the Facebooks of the world. And don't, this is not heresy, don't get scared, but get those tools adapted for use by the boards. Things like discussion walls, feeds like that, but with all the proper protections and controls and security built around it. So, a particular committee can have one discussion, another committee can have a different discussion, that kind of thing. And then the other thing that we're seeing, and this is a little bit further out, but I do think it's very real, is the idea of documents being complemented with data. The principal asset in the boardroom today is the document. But there's really no reason why you couldn't have some form of board intelligence based upon dashboards. So that, I think, is something on the horizon as well. There's going to be a lot of churn, whereas a few years ago, I think all board portals, irrespective of the vendor, they were all very similar. But I think now, with this shift taking place, I think the dynamic is changing, and I think the basis for competition is going to shift to technology and innovation. And now I think we're seeing a more traditional technology market where it's no longer just about, well, do I have a brand or a footprint, something like that. Is it who's got the best technology? And so between that dynamic where vendors are going to be motivated to come up with the best ideas, and directors now being these more aggressive absorbers and sponsors of technology, it should make for a really sort of fast-moving space.
Whether it's board portals or platforms, I still believe it's not a case of if, but it's just a case of when. So, Joe, thanks for giving our audience a great update on the technology in the boardroom, and we'll look forward to having you back. See you in 6 months if anything has already changed that'll help guide this along. So,
thank you, TK.
Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
That will conclude this edition of our board educational webcast. So we'll ask you to join us again when we cover another topic that will be helpful to make you a better director. We'll see you then.
Joe Ruck can be reached at jruck@boardvantage.com. This has been a presentation of Corporate Board Member, an NYSE Euronext company.